the 20th of October, 2022. I'm your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I'm also known as Nuclear Proctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. That's all four of you who are currently on the show. It only took a decade to get up to that many people. If you work really, really, really hard for a decade, you too can have 4 people on the beginning of your shows. Censorship. There's probably at least 5 or 6 people there. But they're censoring at least 2 of them. And so, we have a poll tonight. Is the Degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency a terrorist organization? Terrorist. And we got 12 votes, and we got 5 people on the show. Wow. Kicking ass. That'll teach the nuclear industry to mess around with me. Atoms for Humanity. Did you know the A-10 dirtbag warthog only shoots dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions? Well, now you do. Lots and lots of crazy nuclear stories to cover. And Fukushima is still killing our planet as we speak. Ah, yes, the boat. Ugh. Where do I even start? Well, I got a little video. Might as well play that and get it out of the way. Let's play. I'm going to play a little video for you. That'll tell the story of today. It's the 20th of October, 2022. Getting close to 1 p.m. Tide's just starting to come up. So we're going to go out and we change the oil. We change the main oil. Alright, we got the oil out. That's pretty black looking. That's the way it goes anyway. That finished draining for a minute or so, and we'll take it down, stick it in the water. It's a bit windy, but we'll take it down, see if it'll go up in RPMs anyway. Changed into gear oil. Number 2. There's a horrible smell off that, man. Wow. But they're magnetized, so I don't see any steel on it. I rebuilt the leg a couple of years ago, right? Cost $800. On a 2500, and a friend of mine is an aircraft mechanic. He replaced the guts with a 150 horsepower. This is a 115, right? So it's a much more beefier leg. The oil's clean, but there's no water in the oil. That's got a lot of miles. That's got 250 hours on it. What a terrible smell off that. I might as well let that drain because I never heated the engine up. So all we got left to do now is fill up the leg. Woo! So it won't fit down on top of the bottle properly, but that's okay. Take it out and dump it in the ocean and see what happens. Let's give it a bit of gas. Get it over here. With all the disappointments we've had with this thing, I'm afraid to give it up to 3,000 RPMs. 600 RPMs. That's not normal. Show me an oil leak. Show me an oil leak. What the hell does that mean? I just changed the oil, changed the filter, changed the leg oil. Now it's restricting it. Now it's restricting at 3,000 RPMs. It's doing it at 2,000 RPM. Well, that's a bit of a surprise to me that now it's doing it at 2,000 RPMs. Let's go ahead a little bit further. I reset all the... So yeah, 2,000 RPM. And the oil light is coming on. We just changed the oil. Okay, nobody behind me coming out full speed, is it? Oh well, back to the drawing board. God, not again. I'll have to take it to the mechanic, I suppose. I'm thinking maybe, because I've done a lot of work on that engine, maybe I accidentally unclipped something, one of the sending units or sensors. There's no reason. Now, the oil pump is mechanical. It's not driven by electricity, it's mechanical. So all you can really do is kill the bearings in it, and you'll know because you'll start losing oil, right? I'm not losing oil. So it's pumping oil. I don't even want to think about it. I'm heartbroken. I didn't spend all that money, and now it's dying at 2,000 RPMs. Well, it's not jumping at 2,000 RPMs, but the alarms are going off. I don't know. We'll go down on Tuesday or Monday and see what they can tell me, I suppose. Transparent open discussion needed to forge a new nuke policy. Transparent. This is Japan, folks, talking about the word transparent. They probably just learned the word. Obviously, they'd never heard of it before. And they got the local president, prime minister puppet to brush aside the many problems of nuclear power and focus solely on factors favorable to its expansion is tantamount to holding the discussion with a foregone conclusion. Wait a second. You just lied all day, every day for 11 years about Fukushima. It's absurd to suggest that you have any kind of morals whatsoever or transparency. It's absurd. And that goes for every creature in the degenerate nuclear industry, particularly the IAEA. Committee members are overwhelmingly in favor of promoting nuclear power. Overwhelmingly. Like the EU taxonomy, they're overwhelmingly in favor of calling it green when it's absurd. Aiding decarbonization by emitting no greenhouse gases. Now, they're talking about transparency and they're saying connotations like that, or references like that. I'm busted up now. You got everything torn up. Trying to get the motor. We got to get out and look. There's no birds out there. This is what we got to get. We got to get out there and prove it. See, we can't just say it. Unfortunately, we got to get out there and actually prove it. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully, I go out there and there's birds are landing on the roof and stealing my sunglasses. It'll be awesome. The claim that a nuclear power plant, which has two external power plants supplying it, gas, oil, and coal, doesn't emit greenhouse gases, but that's what radioactive emissions are, greenhouse gases. They pulse energy every second. Gas, coal, and oil emissions don't travel very far, and they don't pulse energy every second. Pretty disappointed in the engine today. Probably everybody else is too, I'm sure. This is a model 16 days of radioactive fallout from Japan. 16 days covers the entire planet. That's greenhouse gases. Is because gas, oil, and coal, first off, don't make plumes like that. Gas, oil, and coal can't heat a planet up. Their emissions, they're natural to the planet. The man-made anthropogenic radiation pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. Oh, yeah. Finland, France's new reactor design. It doesn't risk more delays after damage was found. It does have delays after the damage is found. A big disease factory. Damage has been detected in the feedwater pumps of Finland's Olkiluoto 3. It was supposed to originally start operation in 2009. It's just a little behind schedule, right? TVO said the latest problem has occurred in the pumps located in the so-called turbine island at the heart of the nuclear reactor's power production. That's the very worst spot, where water from its feed water tanks is pumped into steam generators. That'll never start up, that thing. And they got to show Greta screaming. Greta Thunberg kills off the anti-nuclear campaign. I don't really remember an anti-nuclear campaign from that young adult. The climate activist change of heart is only one of many. Rob Loney. Why are you going to show that picture for you, Arican? She criticized Germany's plans to shut down its 3 remaining nuclear plants. We know. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of medias have carried that story as if it was an alien encounter or something. Hey, whatever blows your skirt up there, buddy. Can a slew? What the hell is a slew? This is New Scientist, by the way. I'll introduce you to New Scientist after this story, actually. Can a slew of nuclear fusion startups deliver unlimited clean energy? No. We've been trying to harness the reaction that powers the stars for decades. And now private firms are promising commercial fusion within a decade. Is there any reason to believe them this time? If you give them all the money they want, they can't do it. The industry is lunatic. They got every university on the planet working on it, trying to solve it. They got none of the universities on the planet trying to solve storage for renewables. Nothing. Not one. I think the biggest plague on the planet is media, is a journalist. They announced, let's flush it out, I suppose. 1951, the president of Argentina announced the results of a secretive project in northern Patagonia. The scientists had achieved nuclear fusion, he said, harnessing the reaction that powers the sun
to herald a future in which energy would be sold in half-liter bottles like milk. They're still doing that one, by the way. They're still trying to trick you into that lie. Energy will be sold in half-liter bottles like milk. Gee, that sounds like every nuclear scientist I ever heard tell of. Things soon turned sour when researchers returned to report the whole thing was an expensive, embarrassing fraud, like fusion energy, like small modular reactors. Yeah, just like that. Audacious claims followed by disappointment, rinse and repeat, kind of like my boat. It explains the tiresome resistance of the old joke that fusion has always been 30 years away. It's actually 50 was the joke, and always will be. Private fusion firms have received more investments than the entire history of its enterprise. Private fusion firms. They're throwing money at them because they're professional lawyers. It's got to be the strangest headline imaginable. The surprising silver lining of the atomic age nuclear test. Silver lining from turning the planet into a big disease, for decimating all the species and humanity, sealing the fate of humanity. By the way, when they blew up, and they knew this back then, these underwater nuclear tests, the salt water, the sulfur, you would create these spherical balls like a soccer ball, and they would ingest uranium, plutonium, and americium and everything else, and become super hot particles. It's a bizarre phenomenon. They're extremely dangerous atoms. Crazy as it might seem, there was a time when the U.S., the Soviet Union, and other countries tested nuclear weapons by exploding them into the atmosphere. Oh, you mean fuel pools? No. Nuclear weapons, Dana. Yeah. Fuel pools. Fuel pools have no containment. They're split in atoms all day into your environment. And numbers that are just boggles the human. You can't do the numbers without a calculator. Each day our planet is being slaughtered by the atomic plague from fuel pools worldwide. 1945 to 63, when such tests finally were banned, the underground tests all broke the earth open. Everything was vented into the environment. More than 500 nuclear bombs were detonated. And, like the biggest Soviet Union bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. 3,800. The Castle Bravo was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. That's almost 5,000 Nagasaki bombs in just two of those bombs. So there's 500 of them. So do the math. Releasing radioactive fallout to spread far and wide across the planet, causing harm to the environment and human health. It covered the whole planet. Everyone born in the U.S. after 1951 has been exposed to nuclear fallout. For some, it resulted in increased risk of thyroid cancer. So when you hear that particular statement there, that's the biggest lie you're ever going to hear. There's 1,800 illnesses. Cancer is not the only thing. Excuse me. Where the hell did that come from? A single sneeze? Who does that? It's resulted in an increased risk of thyroid cancer, according to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. So here's the CDC cutting your throat. Look at that. Like heart attacks is one of the biggest byproducts of radioactive fallout, and death by heart attacks is the second one. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control, Degenerates, world's largest chloride salt system in place. World's largest chloride. And so when it comes from the World Nuclear News, or these are industrial lobbying groups, right? Molten chloride fast reactor. Like majority of their so-called salt reactors melted down. But because they're at military sites, they're not talked about or acknowledged. Like Santa Susana has had multiple nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. One of them is 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island for radioactive fallout. You don't talk about it. The Mayak in Russia, which is former Soviet Union, that thing is one of the worst disease factories in human history for decades. So 12 hours after my videos are posted, they get longer or shorter, typically longer. 2 hours and 19 minutes. 11 hours later, 2 hours and 19 minutes. After 12 hours, 2 hours and 30 seconds, rather. 19 seconds and 30 seconds. So that video last night was 11 seconds longer. They don't do that to other people's videos. They only do it to my videos. At 12 hours exactly, my videos will get longer. Total coincidence. Nothing to do with the nuclear degenerate industry, I'm sure. Bookstores vanishing from Japan with fall in population. Is anybody surprised by that one? U.S. nuclear industry is struggling to get replacement for the Ruskies' enriched uranium. We talk about this a lot. The fabled small modular reactors can only work on very, very weapons high-grade fuel, which is mixed oxide on top of that. But the weapons grade is down blended. I can't remember what the percentage was. Was it 19% or something? It's a ridiculous number. And they don't want to take Russia's. They haven't stopped, but they want to get their own fuel because they want to cause more inflation. The inflation worldwide is caused by United Nations countries, because Canada is part of the United Nations, so Canada doesn't even exist anymore, right? We're like the toenail of the United Nations. We're always in a sock and stuck in a shoe, and everybody walks on us. U.S. nuclear industry is struggling to get replacement. Well, not really. They got all the money in the world. They're busy for those disease factories. With the U.S. increasingly becoming dependent on nuclear power. With the U.S. increasingly becoming dependent on nuclear power? What the frig are you talking about? There's one reactor in 30 years or something that they built. All the reactors they got now are decrepit. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to tell you what they're up to. In the wake of the energy crisis sparked by Russia-Ukraine conflict. No, it was sparked by an embargo from America and other countries. They caused the inflation that doesn't hurt Russia at all, but hurts the impoverished people and the entire country. Only one company sells the high-assay, low-enriched uranium, the HALEU, and it's a Russian. Production of HALEU is a critical mission. All efforts to increase its production are being evaluated, the creepy spokesperson said. And another degenerate besides World Nuclear News is Nuclear Engineering International. They done it one time where they actually put a name on an article. It's extraordinary, unusual to see someone put their name on their articles with World Nuclear News or Nuclear Engineering. They're actually both lobbying groups. And Google always puts them right on the front page. TRISO-X breaks ground on a commercial advanced nuclear fuel facility. Breaks ground. Nuclear engineer had another one, a global uranium realignment. So when you hear stuff like that, that's very concerning, that kind of narrative, global alignment, a new global alignment. There's no doubt that has shaken global uranium markets. I'll get to the point here in a second. Oh, look at a carbon-free hole in the ground. That's the spiders dug that big hole in the ground. They all ran away from everywhere else worldwide, and they went there and dug a hole in the ground. That's why we got no spiders here in Canada. Well, we got some, but they don't live in trees anymore. They only live on your houses. Because houses don't suck up radiation like the trees and bushes do, see? Net zero targets, which he said now covers 70 or 90% of the population of the planet, the global population. So the United Nations is setting all the policies for all the countries, and they have put people in positions of authority in all of these countries to make sure that the countries now do whatever United Nations tells them to do. United Nations and IAEA. The IAEA is United Nations too, see? So is the degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency a terrorist organization? They got 100% of the votes. 25 of them. We got 17 likes and wow, 24 people on this show. That's amazing. Must be CBC must be promoting me on their website or something to have that many people on my show. 24 people. Geez, I'm all nervous now. Not used to anybody watching my show. The need to grow power grids and provide users with consistent baseload power. Nuclear is at the center of that triangle. We need the need to grow power grids and provide the users with consistent baseload power. Like, anybody that promotes nuclear should be removed from their positions of authority immediately. They're a threat to all species. And they're going to destroy the country where they're promoting that. Gitzel, who they're quoting here, is actually with Camco. Camco's history's got a really strange history. They originally made their money off oil, right? But he was cautious about whether, and they don't make a lot of money off uranium, they just make a lot of evil with it. Whether the conditions were in place for more uranium extractions. Instead, it is likely to show slow to respond to rising demand. It gets a little confusing for some people, I'm sure, but at the end of the stories, we always make sense, I hope. The pressure on uranium supplies has attracted the interest of commodity traders who are purchasing significant volumes of uranium and sequestering it, like Sprout and Yellowcake, are buying the physical uranium and storing it. They're not moving it or nothing. They're just, it's in layaway, not layaway, it's paid for, but it's just, they're not going to use it. They're not going to ship it out to the market to turn it into fuel. So this way, uranium mines like Camco can start hiring people because only their uranium is going to get bought. And then Sprout and Yellowcake will sell their uranium when the nuclear renaissance comes along. But there is no nuclear renaissance, right? This was a Ponzi scam that started early last year. Uranium's flatlined for over 10 years. Yellowcake was set up in 2018 to buy the physical uranium. They say to provide investors with exposure to uranium commodity at a time when the supply-demand strongly suggested a resurgence in uranium prices, which is not true, obviously. You have to have 100 reactors being built to tie your money up in uranium stocks in the hopes you're going to get some kind of earning off it. But the nuclear industry is, what you're seeing this is incredible posturing from the nuclear industry. Everything is meant to hoodwink the population and particularly investors. Sprout, which was launched last year, and ended up at over $1 billion so they can buy physical uranium stocks and store it away, which was just a temporary artificial inflation of the stocks of uranium because it just happened randomly, right? But then, because there's no market, there's no new reactors, the bottom falls out. But what that meant was, by spending $1 billion, they tricked investors who thought, wow, this stuff is climbing through the roof. So they buy, and a week later, the bottom falls out. They've done this for 11 years, but this was Yellowcake and Sprout Trust in the last 2 years. In particular, that was the only time we've seen that particular scam. And they've artificially inflated it many times in the last 12 months. Based upon Sprout buying the physical uranium and then tricking investors to buy it, then they cash out their stocks they had for cheap and stole the money from the investors. So it's 100% insidiously, monstrously, hideously evil. These new players have helped create volatility in the spot prices, in uranium spot. These new players, these new actors, these are criminals. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was cooked up by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which used to be called Atoms for Peace, by the way, not the International Atomic Energy Agency. Their original names was Atoms for Peace. Atoms for Misery. There's no such thing as peace. So is the Degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency a terrorist organization? Yeah, we got an overwhelming 100% vote saying, of course it is, Dana. What is the International Atomic Energy Agency? Well, they're a terrorist organization. Countries around the world rely on nuclear technology for innovation in food. That's not true at all. They've been hoodwinked and deceived and manipulated and tricked and coerced, but there's not any reliability. You're radiating people's food, for God's sakes. The fear of it used as a weapon, that's what it is. And so if you eat food from Japan, that's a weapon. Food from Japan is a weapon. It's a deadly weapon against you and your children and your friends and your families. If you go outdoors, or you breathe air, or you drink water, then you are being poisoned by the nuclear industry. Nuclear technology from radioactive fallout. Nuclear technology for innovation in food. That's one of the scariest things I've ever heard. prompted world leaders in 57 to create the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, which is United Nations. Its task is to promote uses of nuclear energy. It was set up as the world's Atoms for Peace organization within the United Nations family. United Nations family. Using the word family with United Nations is terrifying. Eisenhower called United Nations the military-industrial complex, for God's sakes. Within the United Nations family. United Nations, I think now actually, is only 175 countries. I can't remember anymore. They claim it's 175 countries I've seen today. And this is the military-industrial complex. This is 175 to 195 militaries. They claim the agency is affiliated with the United Nations. It is independent, but has to report to United Nations General Assembly. No, they're 100% UN, for God's sakes. To claim they're independent is ludicrous. Look at the goblins, man. My goodness. There's a disconnect from reality, and then there's the United Nations, people in the United Nations. They're so brainwashed. A lot of them are probably good people, but they're so brainwashed, they actually don't know good from bad. Government in Ireland is urged to reconsider the Ireland's nuclear power ban. Is urged the government. The last people that should be allowed to make a decision, the government. Small nuclear reactors. Why are we talking about that again? I thought I solved that yesterday. Can support Ireland's energy security and reduce fossil fuels, says Engineers Ireland. Engineer Ireland is kooky stuff. Small nuclear reactors that don't exist. So rather coming up with solutions, it's how can you have a future with this lot in positions of power? They're calling this a small modular reactor, folks. Yeah, it totally looks like it'll fit on the back of a truck. The world's first small modular reactor began operating in June 2018. It was built by U.S. manufacturing giant Westinghouse Electric Company and is 400 kilometers to the south of Shanghai. What's really interesting is I've never heard tell of it as a small modular reactor before. So the Irish Times is desperate, right? We've covered them lots of times. Their pro-nuke stories. Now this one has got a few twists into it though. The government should reconsider the legislative ban on generating nuclear energy for small modular reactors that don't even exist, given the extent of the current climate and energy crisis. Climate and energy crisis. The energy crisis was caused by Ireland putting embargoes against Russia, not the other way. The climate is caused by nuclear. 80 years of unmitigated releases have now doomed all species on our planet. We're working to have a conversation to come up with ways to mitigate it and to preserve humanity and the species. Some of this, whatever species survives this onslaught of the atomic plague. According to the main body representing engineers in Ireland, speaking at the annual conference in Dublin, Engineers Ireland, these are scumbags. Why don't you build storage for renewable? And that's the end of it. Scumbags, bunch of scumbag engineers. So instead of coming up with solutions, You want to dig the hole to bury everybody into. It's revolting. Engineers Ireland President scumbag John Shit-for-Brain Power said the case for building small modular reactors should be considered. The technology generates no carbon emissions. Like, this is an engineer saying stuff like this, folks. And the president, on top of that, claiming that small modular reactors exist and that they generate no carbon emissions. Whenever the nuclear industry says it generates no carbon emissions, there should be a law where 100 police have to show up and beat them to death with baseball bats. In the midst of our current climate and energy crisis, perhaps it's time to reawaken this discussion on nuclear energy in an informed, mature, and balanced manner. Like, you're not mature, you have no balance, you're not informed, and you're going backwards instead of forwards. We as engineers, you should just build storage for the renewables, problem solved. We as engineers. This is why you got to get rid of presidents of organizations like that, because they do shit like this. That's the first thing they're going to do. The industry will put the pro-nuclear positions of authority. They'll come out and promote nuclear, despite the fact that it's the worst idea. Innovative approaches like the use of small modular reactors need to be given consideration, real consideration. This is madness. The small modular reactors don't exist. You're talking something 30 years down the road at best. If you work hard, you can build storage for your renewables, and you get rid of gas, oil, coal, and nuclear at one time. Stupid. I think we should get rid of engineering. After reading that, I think that should be removed from all universities immediately. If they're going to produce idiots like this, then that's a threat to humanity, isn't it? The international shift towards something that don't exist. Small modular reactors. They're more flexible, despite the fact they don't exist, and they're more cost effective, despite the fact they don't even exist. There's only one of them exist on paper, and that's not even complete. Offers real opportunities, says Paul Stein, for global decarbonization. This is the chairman of Rolls-Royce small modular reactors, which, by the way, don't exist. And they cost about $2 billion. They don't exist. You got no idea what they're going to cost. And can be built in a factory and moved to the site. Again, they don't exist. You don't have a model to make these assertions with. 30 years ago, you would just beat the shit out of people like that. That'd be the end of it. Continuous clean energy from something that don't exist. You're an engineer, stupid. Look it up in the dictionary and figure out what an engineer actually is supposed to do. You come up with solutions. You don't wait for something that doesn't exist and that you're not going to be building. You got renewables. The only thing holding it back, because the industry has done this on purpose, is storage. And there's not batteries. With enhanced safety and security built in. They just promise you'll say anything to get their way, right? Make up lie after lie after lie just to get their way. Carbon free. Clean energy. The amount of nuclear waste from a small modular reactor is minute and is managed safely and securely. It doesn't even exist. You can't even manage the waste that we got. You're going to be using mixed oxide fuel in a small modular reactors if you do manage to get one built. How the frig is that? going to be minute. How the hell are you going to manage that safety when you can't even manage hospital waste safely? Wind and solar were intermittent renewables requiring a backup source like batteries. What the fuck are you talking about? Why would you use batteries for? Why wouldn't you use like water batteries? You pump water up a hill, 2 reservoirs, not pumping it from a river or an ocean, but just 2 reservoirs and recirculate it. Why not use geothermal? Why not use compressed air storage where you just dig mine shafts and compress air down there? You're an engineer. Surely you could figure it out. I think people we got to go back to the days when we used to feed people to lions, right? And everybody used to cheer when the lion tore their fucking head off. Or go back to the days where we burned these creeps on big bonfires and just set fuckers on fire. We got to go back to that day where it was legal just to burn creeps like this. And then everybody can sit around with marshmallows and tell stories of what the world used to be a good place. This option was technically challenging at scale for the batteries. Really? Really? Nuclear, which is critical for decarbonization. I've never, as an energy minister, had a single person, this is what the energy minister of Ireland says, I have never, as an energy minister, had a single person come to me saying, I think we should invest in nuclear. It was an incredible, expensive power supply source. Why would we switch to an incredible, expensive alternative that we have no expertise in? And we don't have the decommissioning capabilities. So engineers, Ireland has been taken over by the nuclear industry. So what is the nuclear industry? Is this like an alien race that comes in and zaps the brains of influential people and turns them into nuclear zombies or something? What the frig is going on? There's no incentive not to be evil. That's why we got to bring back burning people at the stakes. Tie them to, legally, right? Tie them to a stake and set them the fuck on fire. Legally. General Fusion and United Kingdom's Atomic Energy Agency. There's a bunch of friggin' losers. The UK Atomic Energy Agency agreed to advance commercial fusion energy that doesn't exist. Yet initiated projects to advance the commercialization of magnetized target fusion energy as part of an important collaborative agreement. In other words, this is a great way to steal money from the taxpayers. Provide low cost and low carbon energy. So it doesn't matter when anything nuclear now is low carbon, right? The last 2 years has been vicious rhetoric. Now this year it's over the top madness. Leading edge fusion researchers at the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Agency have proven experience building, commissioning, and operating large fusion machines. Like, what are you talking about? There's no fusion reactors pumping energy into the grid. Therefore, it's not functional. Therefore, it's not successful. What's the point of all these lies? Well, it's from nuclear engineering, Dana. What do you expect? That's a good point. The team will fast track the work. What work? You're 50 years away, if you're lucky, from fusion. You're talking about a couple of 100 million degree temperatures Fahrenheit. The only idea you got is from 1904, where you're going to use magnets to try to contain it, which is absurdly stupid, by the way. You sucked up almost all the precious resources on the entire planet, the waste on this, rather than come up with solutions for renewable storage. The only way to describe the nuclear industry is idiots and monsters and demons. They don't have a single person in the entire nuclear industry that is the face of the nuclear, that is likable. And in desperation, they put Bill Gates and Elon Musk up on a pedestal. And they throw them names out there as if that's the holy grail. If their names are used there for nuclear, must be awesome. You got to realize what kind of mentality, what kind of personality, and what are these people like that regurgitate and promote this kind of narrative all the time. These are hideous people. You got to be incredibly evil to get degrees just so you can tell lies. You got to be like some really sadistic, heartless, soulless, twisted, subhuman species to perpetrate this kind of deception, this kind of deceit and dishonesty. Because every facet of nuclear is the epitome of dishonesty. They regurgitate these cliches that are impossible. They're simply impossible. None of it will ever come to fruition. But they're out there all day screeching. And what that does is it delays the advancements of any other technology. They're putting, these memorandums of understanding for these small modular reactors that don't exist. Now they exclude everything. No matter how brilliant and how appropriate it might be, it's excluded. No, we're going to wait for the small modular reactors. Did you know they can build them in factories and ship them on trucks? They're carbon free, I tell you what. They'll decarbonize the globe, the entire planet. This is, so they had an agenda, they put the agenda out to the nuclear industry, and the nuclear industry is a bunch of crackpots. And so when they come out to promote the narrative, and they're scary as shit. They're frightening. They're like, their personalities are just horrific. Can you imagine what they do to their children, right? Their children are probably locked in the closets for 20 hours a day. Nearly 2,000 staff at the British company that makes and maintains stupid, useless nuclear warheads that you can't use will vote on whether to carry out a strike because, of inflation caused by the very people that's paying them. Embargoes. Because of the embargoes, the inflation that he wants to raise. The people that are willing to kill the whole planet for a paycheck wants to raise. Actually, that doesn't surprise me at all. They're very, very, very self-centered, arrogant, pompous. Safely maintaining the UK's nuclear deterrent is a complex and highly stressful operation that requires extremely high levels of dedication and training. Have you seen the pictures of them being idiots in that industry over the years, like we showed here? Seen all the fumbling and idiotic things these people do over the years? It's frightening. They're in charge of nuclear weapons that you can't even use, and you won't use, because you can't cash your checks on Friday if you use the bloody things, so they're not going to use them. Equipment being installed in ANSTO's radioactive waste processing facility. Again, this is the World Nuclear News. Celebrating 15 years of being monsters. Now, this is from Australia. So this system you see there is going to... Actually, let's go through it. Construction was completed and processing equipment is being installed. And it's going to begin operations in 2025. They're going to take medical waste and make it so they can store it. This is what they're claiming. This is the contraption they got. Will treat intermediate level liquid radioactive waste. Liquid radioactive waste. Which means the liquid is radioactive. For the production of nuclear medicine by immobilizing the waste for final disposal. Wait for it. The radioactive liquid waste is mixed with additives that create a slurry. That is then dried, which means you got to get rid of the water, which means you're going to release all the isotopes into the environment. To produce a free-flowing powder. You can't produce the powder. You got a liquid radioactive waste. You're going to add something to turn it, make it thicker like a gravy. And then you're going to dry it out, which means you're going to evaporate the water. Where's all those isotopes going to go? You can't contain it. You can't filter it. A slurry that is dried, the radioactive liquid waste is dried, which means you got huge releases into the environment. IAEA Nuclear Law Institute. They created this after Fukushima, folks. Supporting global development of national nuclear legislation. This is a bunch of lawyers at the beck and call. The United Nations is a disaster for our planet and for the species. We can't have a future with IAEAs and UNSCLEAR and ERPA and UN, World Health Organization, and the rest of them destroying us from every direction. The UN is destroying humanity from about 240 different directions. Like separate organizations that are subsidies of this destructive company known as United Nations. It has no sovereignty over any planet, any country, but every country does whatever it tells it to do. "60 lawyers and regulators from 54 of the scumbag member states, the degenerate IAEA, are taking part in lectures and practical exercises covering all areas of nuclear laws." No, their job is to deny anybody injured by nuclear compensation. That's their one sole purpose job. They never admit nuclear ever hurt a fly anywhere on the entire planet. Known as the Nuclear Law Institute. And that's a scary thing, folks. That's a frightening thing. That's a coward thing to do, by the way. And they got to put it to word global warming, which is caused by nuclear. So global warming is elevating interest in nuclear energy. No matter what happens on the planet, right? If we have an Ebola outbreak in Canada, half of Canadians die from Ebola, the IAEA and nuclear industry would come out and say, well, we need more nuclear power plants. That wouldn't have happened. Right? If you have a big ferry sink, the nuclear industry would come out, well, if you had nuclear power, it wouldn't have happened. I hope you learned your lesson. Since 2011, around 600 degenerate scumbags have been trained to deny victims the ability to have a future. The new nuclear era. The new nuclear era. and showing a woman and her two kids. This is typical of the media. It can't help but be evil. That's just its nature, see? Today, only 7 countries, the United Kingdom, France, China, stupid Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea, which was flattened by United Nations now for 70-something years, possess nuclear weapons. Oh, great. Canada, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which has had something like $28 billion. They're a non-profit organization, of course. You got $28 billion. You know how much interest that makes every year? I don't, but it's a lot. They give away millions and millions of dollars to just random people in these communities they're trying to take over. Just gives it to them. How's your day going? Pretty bad. Oh, come on down to the office. I'll write you a check for a couple of $1 million. What have I got to do? I got to do nothing. I'll give you another couple of million next year. That's what they're doing, right? So they got the latest, greatest shit for brains. Webster. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which has managed nothing. They said they got to get the consent of the community. Can't build a repository. And so they give half the community millions of dollars. The other one, they sick the cops on them. Guaranteed divide. Guaranteed to fail, right? And just say that Bruce, one of the communities up in Bruce, English or whatever, decides that they're going to go ahead with the nuclear dump. It won't be ready till 2045. Which means the Nuclear Waste Management Organization took 45 years before it actually had a spot to move the waste to. Which meant the 5,500,000 bundles of fuel is still splitting atoms into the environment and the communities and the ecosystems and the water tables and everything else, which is going to pulse energy for millions of years and is going to kill everything in the species that it can. Has added a new vice idiot to its executive team in preparation for his transition to the next phase of implementing Canada's plan for the safe, long-term storage of the used nuclear fuel, which is still splitting the atom into the environment and will for millions of years. You gotta contain it. You can't contain it because the gas is built up because it's still splitting the atoms. Alan Webster, former Director Regulatory Affairs Environmental Assessment. He's not getting that job because he's a good guy. He's getting that job because he's a maniac. He's a 100% coward, a 100% bully at work too, I bet you. The whole story is absurd. Every facet of nuclear is like a really, really bad dream. Once the site for Canada's deep geological repository has been selected in 2024, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization will shift our focus to the regulatory decisions-making processes that would allow construction to begin if approvals are granted, if the community accepts it. Why not put it somewhere where it's not in a farmer's prime farmland hemorrhaging radiation and not in the community? Why put it somewhere where there's 7,000 lakes? You can't get the job working in the nuclear industry unless you're certifiably evil or literally stupid. If you're a stupid zombie and you do whatever you're told, the nuclear industry might hire you. And potential host communities define the role in the process, working with indigenous people. They hate the indigenous people. If you look at the legacy of nuclear waste, the majority of it has been put in indigenous populations' water tables in their communities, protecting people and the environment. That takes some nerve, man. That takes some serious nerves to say stuff like that. It's a ludicrous assertion. They got zero proof that they want to protect anybody, let alone the environment. And on the other side of it, there's endless proof that that's 100% dishonest. That's completely dishonest. It's nuclear, Damon. What do you expect? That's how they roll. They're dishonest as they get. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization is a not-for-profit organization with $28 billion, and they're throwing millions and millions of dollars at little businesses or libraries or natives or whatever the case may be where they want to set up shop for nuclear disease factories. They just give them hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. No restriction. No, we're not trying to buy your vote. We just got a lot of money. We're not for profit. We got to throw it away because otherwise it's profit. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization is the very industry that made the waste in the first place and refused to store it properly and have done everything they could to poison you. And has poisoned you, particularly if you're in Canada. Welcoming the largest generator of clean power in the U.S. And this plant that they show you that picture, the Uranium Nuclear Generating Station, just so happens to be surrounded by farms. What's the odds? Never thought I'd see that until I looked at every single plant, and that's what I see. Well, not every single one. 99% of the plants worldwide are surrounded by farms. That's a total coincidence, I'm told. They're not trying to poison you in the supermarkets, no. Nuclear reactors are America's clean energy battleships. Did you hear that one? Nuclear reactors are America's clean energy battleships. Nuclear reactors are battleships, disease factories. Hemorrhaging radiation is diseases. That's what man-made radiation is. Once it gets into you, there's up to 1,800 diseases and cancer. Nuclear reactors are America's clean energy battleship. I still can't get over that one. That's going to haunt me all week in that line. They make up the majority of our zero carbon power, Dana. See, every time I hear that, I want to drive down and punch him in the mouth. Every reactor on the planet has to have 2 external gas, oil, and coal plants, for goodness sakes. Every reactor on the entire planet has 2 dedicated 24 hours a day dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants to power the plant. To build it, they need 2 of them. To run it for its lifetime, they need 2 of these. And 60 years or 100 years to decommission it, they still need those 2 gas, oil, and coal plants. To call it carbon-free or zero carbon, or this is a despicable attempted brainwashing, and it's denial on a whole different level because all the media is doing it. Every media out there will do this. I've never come across a media that said these are filthy liars. The existing fleet of reactors started to shrink from 104 reactors in 2012 to 92 today. No, Dana, there's a nuclear renaissance in America, Dana. Rolls-Royce shares are very unpopular. Yeah, because Rolls-Royce is a degenerate scumbag. They're degenerates, they really are. the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the Energentom chief warns of a Fukushima scenario. Now, the reason they're saying Fukushima is because they're claiming Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima. Which, this is ludicrous. A 200-ton reactor was mostly graphite with no fuel pools because it was brand new, is worse than 4 massive reactors that had 8 fuel pools amongst them, 2 for each reactor building, with decades of massive reactor cores in that. It makes Chernobyl look, not Chernobyl was brutal, but it makes Chernobyl look irrelevant. But Chernobyl's not irrelevant. The damage Chernobyl changed the sex ratio of all males and females in Europe, for instance. Which means more males than females. Which also means you can't do that without affecting all the species too. Which means less population, right? Threatens a global disaster. Well, let me show you what Chernobyl done. This is the bottom right-hand corner is 19 days. So this is 19 days. This is the Pacific. That's the Atlantic. You kind of get the picture, right? It covered the whole planet in vicious, massive radioactive fallout that's still going on today. This is why we're losing all the species. This is why all the whales are showing up emaciated. This is why all the birds are showing up emaciated. They're trying to now blame it. This year they try to blame all the die-offs on the bird flu. That's killing everything. It's killing baby foxes, baby raccoons, babies this, baby that. We covered it when they originally came out with the narrative. They didn't do it anymore, but originally they came out with that narrative, and that's kicked off the bird flu die-off. And in the center of the bird flu die-off was one city. Instead of sending the samples to the same government office as all the other communities done, they done independent testing. And all the birds were emaciated. They had all died of starvation. The generators for nuclear power plants should be above 20 degrees Celsius all the time, which is almost 7 degrees Fahrenheit, or they won't start. And so the only source of heat that can maintain the required temperatures, that's the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, is steam coming from an operating power unit. It can be obtained only when at least one nuclear reactor is running. So with the reactors shut down, they can't keep the generators warm. The generators are massive, right? And they ensure nuclear and radiation safely at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear disease factory. When the diesel generators stop, we'll have a Fukushima scenario, which is several thousand times worse than Chernobyl. We remember that within 3 hours, the melting of the active zones and the release of radioactive substances began into the air and water that was cooling the reactors. And this is a threat to the whole world. Really? I never noticed. Obsolete connectors caused last week's blackout. Islamabad. A massive breakdown that left nearly half the country without electricity for over 12 hours was caused by using second-hand parts that were 25 years old. Desperate just to destroy everything. That's what the industry is. Elon Musk. If Russia goes nuclear, then what? Does Elon Musk's voice sound like? Do you get it? That's a pun, I think. Fukushima nuclear plant worker, this is 2015, dies after falling into a tank. The same year they had a worker die who was buried there, digging a hole at a nuclear wasteland. That's the shit job of the century. Uh, 7,000 paper suits a day that they burn in the incinerators. All of the guys in the paper suits are going to die early too. I think it's time to shut the place down and never go back again like the Russians done at Chernobyl. And somebody said, if they do that, the radiation will slowly contaminate other areas. As if the radiation didn't contaminate other areas. This is Fukushima fallout after 20 days. That's, who done that model? CAE, I can't remember. That's a 20-day model of radioactive fallout. But the trolls show up and say if they abandon the site like they done at Chernobyl, which is the right thing to do, unfortunately, the radiation will slowly contaminate other areas. When they run out of homeless, they're going to have to abandon the site anyway. Nuclear scientists and academics are not going near it. What can Missouri residents do to minimize the radiation exposure? You move away, stupid. You get out of Dodge. You hit the road, Jack. You don't come back to Missouri no more, no more. That's a strange... I done that story, but I only that must come up again after. New CERN facility allowed study of radiation damage to material. They're talking about the Wigner effect. Irradiation station will investigate the effects of radiation on commercial material like lubricants and gaskets that are used regularly in accelerator beam lines and other radiation environments. Early this year, a water pipe in the CERN accelerators complex sprung a huge leak and it shut down a large section. And water was pouring out of the pipes. And they weren't sure why the leak developed, but they hypothesized that years prior, during routine maintenance, they may have accidentally installed a gasket made of Teflon, a material known to degrade in radioactive environments. So they're saying CERN is a radioactive environment, folks. When neutrons collide with a non-metallic material, it'll rip apart the bonds between the material atoms, which is known as a Wigner effect. But that's true with metal. I don't know why they're saying non-metallic. It's called brittle. A lot of people will call it brittle. The reactors are brittle from the neutron bombardment, but that's because they destroy the bond in the atom, and the material becomes very brittle, very capable of falling apart. And because it's under huge pressure, the last thing you need is a crack in that dam, right? Changes can be dramatic. Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So if Oak Ridge is involved in it, then it's a dead duck. The health impacts of mobile phone towers. Now, we've done videos like this before. I would like to direct you to those videos, but they took down my site last year with 24,000 subscribers when we were looking for spiders in the woods. We got lots of spiders on our houses and fences and trucks, and they all got deformed webs, by the way. And there's no insects in the deformed webs, but there's no spiders in your trees and your woods and your bushes. How come? Because the trees and the bushes suck up radiation and it pulses energy every second, and the spiders can't set up shop there. We look for spiders because spiders' webs, you can see which insects are in that area, right? But spiders also bioaccumulate radiation 1,000% more than background because they're liquefying insects that bioaccumulate the radiation, the atoms, the physical atoms. Health impacts of mobile phone tower radiation on humans and birds. Electric magnetic radiation may cause physical and psychological changes in humans due to the thermal effects generated from the absorption of microwave radiation. It's pulse energy. So it's subtle for small exposure, but continuous exposure, it's nasty, it's life-changing. And another thing about phone or any kind of strong signals, but phone is prevalent now, right? Is that if you got radiation, these signals will make the radiation vibrate more, right? Produces, excites it, is one way to look at it. And so if you're bioaccumulating a lot of radiation and you own a cell phone, you're going to have some serious physical problems that you can't explain, that the doctors probably can't figure out. But that's from bioaccumulation. The natural adverse side effects of the bioaccumulation is your body is under siege. So your body has to attack each atom with white blood cells. And because it's not like a cut on your finger where the white blood cells are going to cure it, the white blood cells will attack it for the rest of your life. And so the more you bioaccumulate, the more white blood cells you're producing, which means you're displacing the red blood cells. And the red blood cells are the ones that carry oxygen and nutrition. So you're displacing them to produce the red. The red are perpetual, it never stops, and it'll continue, it'll try for decades and eventually build a tumor around the anthropogenic man-made isotope that's in your body. But because you can now, if you're eating Japanese food, you're going to start producing so much white blood cells, they call that leukemia. But before that gets diagnosed, you compromise your immune system. So now you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign and innocuous and harmless. The considerable increase in mobile phone users in the country, accumulations of mobile tower establishments in every nook and corner, has raised questions on its probable impact on wildlife and human health. Electromagnetic radiation are released by the cell phone towers. More the numbers of antennas, the more the intensity of radiation in the nearby area. The electromagnetic power radiation affects birds and bees and ants and trees. And you'll see trees within a half a mile of these towers. The part of the tree facing the tower will lose all the foliage, and if it's a new tree developing, it'll grow away from it, but it won't have growth pointing towards the towers. So imagine if you're on a city block and one of them is, you can see it from your window. You're getting pounded. Birds have larger body to weight ratio in comparison to humans, so they absorb more radiation. And the fluid content in the body of the birds is lesser, so it gets heated up quicker. And a large number of birds die each year from collisions with telecommunication masts. I don't understand that one. Birds can fly between the branches. It's magic. You ever watch birds zipping between the branches of trees? It's magic, right? So how are they ended up colliding in that? Which that's a worrying statement, right? How the cell phone tower radiation affects humans. It can cause physical and psychological changes in humans due to the thermal effects generated from the absorption of microwave radiation. The exposure can lead to the genetic defects and affects the reproduction process. Are they going to try to blame Fukushima's effects on cell phones? It also affects the central nervous system of the body, which is notorious for radiation doing that, see? All of these attributes are typical from man-made radioactive fallout from nuclear. It can also cause non-thermal effects that are caused by radio frequency fields at levels too low to produce significant heating and are due to movements of calcium and other ions across the cell membrane. The exposure is known to be responsible for fatigue, nausea, irritability, headaches, loss of appetite, and psychological disorders, which are the same attributes you see from being poisoned by man-made radioactive fallout. Avoiding overlapping of high radiation fields is very worrisome. New towers should not be permitted within a radius of 1 kilometer of another tower, because the overlapping is catastrophic. Now, I've done presentations just on cell phones emissions, radio wave and frequencies, and it was really just like, wow, all the academic studies. I still got them there. I'm going to have to do another video on it now. The location, frequency of the towers and other towers emitting should be made available in the public domain. And mapping of all cell phone towers to be maintained to monitor the populations of birds and bees in and around the wildlife protected areas and the mobile towers. And any study conducted on the impacts of the birds and bees and animals and wildlife should be shared to facilitate appropriate policy for formulations. That's an interesting story. What can Missouri residents, my apologies because I should have had that earlier, what can Missouri residents do to minimize the radiation exposure? Well, first off, that little Geiger counter at best is going to find some gamma. It's not going to find alphas, betas, and neutrons. And then this story, whoever wrote this is either misled or scum, one or the other, or both. Elevated levels of radiation be detected in soil, interior, dust samples at an elementary school in Missouri. You need to move editor. There's no way to clean it up. The radiation, and it only takes one dose ingesting and breathing and consuming to make you sick as you get older. The radiation is thought to be related to development of nuclear bombs. Not thought to be, it is. So it's a whole host of isotopes, none of them that they acknowledge, by the way. The Coldwater Creek area is contaminated with nuclear waste residue. So radioactive fallout, we don't call it radioactive fallout residue, we call it radiation, isotopes. And just a single atom can induce a tumor in decades down the road. But because there's so much in the environment, it's going to cause all kinds of autoimmune disorders. Environmental testing was done by the Army Corps. They're the last people you want to do testing. The very, 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 very last people. Actually, you never want them doing the testing. Dust in the gym of the school and the boiler room contain radioactive thorium. Well, really? You think uranium and plutonium and americium, neptunium and strontium is all decayed down to thorium or lead or plutonium, polonium rather? Because that's what they're implying there, see? When they talk about thorium. So they talk about lead-210, polonium-210, radium-226. These are the isotopes that the public relation firm will use to manipulate you, hoodwink you. It's completely dishonest and deceptive and deceitful. Elevated levels at elementary school. Well, you can't clean the school up. You can't even tear the school down and build another school there and make it safe. It doesn't work that way. It has to be somewhere completely far away from the pollution. And this river, they've been cleaning it up for about 20 years, folks. So this is completely dishonest what they're talking about, these isotopes. This is not, like, they're claiming that it's decayed all the way down to lead-210. It's madness that these people are this is children in a school, and you're doing stuff like that. You're regurgitating the worst of the worst lies is to talk about lead and polonium and radium. It's the worst of the worst lies. It's the most dishonest imaginable. These are real life monsters that do stuff like that. They're 100% evil entities. They're not humans. The school's situation, the Coldwater Creek, was contaminated by residuals. Again, using that word, when you see that word in a nuclear contaminated area and then you talk about lead and stuff like that, that's a degenerate scumbag that does that, see? That's a revolting parasite that uses that kind of narrative. You're really, that's a child molester for sure that uses that kind of narrative. For the manufacture of atomic weapons during World War II, which meant it's full of plutonium, not polonium, but plutonium, named after the devil, and uranium-235, and many, many, many other fission products. Your Geiger counter is not going to pick up thorium or radium, by the way. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a.k.a. SCUM, has been leading the cleanup for 20 years. Cleaning up residual for 20 years, are they? Where did it come from, Dana? They concluded the waste could increase cancer, but there's 1,800 other illnesses: heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. It's just a fraction of the illnesses. And playing there in the 1960s, 1990s, namely boner lung cancer and leukemia. Leukemia is from the bioaccumulation of the radiation and the production of white blood cells, which means you got a lot of radiation in your body when you got leukemia. And possible skin or breast cancer. Again, right, they're talking about cancers. What about the other 1,800 diseases? Cancer is typically the last one to show up. It's I apologize because I get passionate sometimes, and I get upset sometimes, and I lash out sometimes because I think of the victims, and I visually, it really bothers me that somebody with the stroke of a pen could write off the health of hundreds of thousands of people for their little paycheck each week. It's a disgusting industry. It's revolting. Its legacy is hideous. It's monstrous. It's insidious. The community is asked to avoid contact with soil, sediment, water. You get out of there. Don't touch the water or the soil. If you do, wash your hands and take a shower. Get out of there right now. If you're in that area, just get out of there and start over. Your health is not worth whatever equity you got there. It's not worth it. You can't use the equity if you're sick and dying and the money is being utilized to try to make you feel or live a little bit longer, your loved ones. It's a friggin' mistake. Look, these kind of warnings are not for thorium or radium or polonium. These are for uranium and americium and neptunium and strontium and plutonium. Root vegetables should be peeled before consumption. You really think the waste is just in the exterior? Because it's been going on for probably 60 years. You really think, the last thing you want to going to be doing is eating root vegetables, eating anything from that area. The best thing to do is get the freak out of that immediately. And don't look back. And go somewhere and try to start again. And pray that you're not permanently infested with man-made isotopes. Shoes should be removed from before entering the home, and pets should be kept free of soil and creek water before they enter the home. Like, your home is going to be polluted. Your Geiger counter is not going to find the major ones. Everything you just seen there is telling you to get the frig out of there right now. You can't clean this up. It can't be done without making you and your loved ones and everybody else sick. It's in your head, in your head. Zombie. Inside the radiation therapy mobilization mask, and nobody can hear you scream. This is actually appropriate because you should be screaming. They immobilize you so they can hit you with a neutron beam. They love you so much. They want to help you so bad. Help you die. Some scary shit, man. There's madness and then there's nuclear. Nuclear makes madness look like a tantrum, child having a tantrum. Linear accelerator, aka neutron beams, as it moves into position, they hit me with a little ray of sunshine. Little ray of sunshine, yeah? You just want to... Some people should be slapped, yeah? That's one of them right there. So they want you to stay still so they can target the cancer that's caused by radioactive fallout from weapons testing and everything else. More radiation doesn't cure you. There's no evidence that radiation cures you. There's an overwhelming amount of radiation kills you. When you get this kind of treatment, you wreck all your other organs. Cancer grows ballistically now because you've changed dramatically the makeup of your body. How's the poll? There's only one poll. Is the Degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency a terrorist organization? What do we got there? 54 votes. Wow. That's hilarious. 98% of the people said the IAEA is a terrorist organization. Ha 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 ha. That made me smile. That made me laugh. That's a good way to kick the weekend off. I shouldn't be laughing because I got to go in and get an MRI. They're going to radiate the shit out of me to find out if I got to lose a kidney. Because there's no other option. You're forced to go in and get irradiated. What a disgusting industry. Don't let them put that vest on you to protect you, because now the machine will pound you with more radiation to try to get through the vest. It does it all automatically, right? They've been trying to get them to stop it, but they won't stop using it. So I'm off to the city tomorrow to get irradiated. Makes me sick to my guts thinking about it. We don't got the boat working. We spent all that money. We don't got the boat working. Oops. I just wanted to get the boat working, and I thought it was the right thing to do when it wasn't. You got birds dying off down here for the last 5 months everywhere. All kinds of species. Let's end the poll, I guess. 54 votes, 98% of the people. That's awesome. We only got 42 likes, but we got 54 votes. Hey, I'm not complaining. What am I supposed to say, right? We'll do a shout out, seems we're here. Anyway. Snakes and doggies. Good night, everybody. Jeff Poor, another Gmail. Annie Chest. James Lucid. I didn't know James talked in that language, new language. That's pretty cool. George Sinclair. Is there actually any safe food to eat? Don't eat anything from Japan, first off. That's rule number one. Rule number two is don't eat anything that's from a county with nuclear power plants because they're surrounded by farms. Don't eat mushrooms because they bioaccumulate radiation. Don't eat shellfish because they bioaccumulated 115,000 times more than a fish would. In your bones, radiation from Fukushima. Yeah, I like it, Don. Vincent. Thinker. Good night, everybody. Patrick, John. I'm just running up to the names here, so I'm probably going to make a few mistakes. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody had a great day. I hope you have a great weekend and a great night for the rest of the night. It's basically, what time is it in my little world? It's 20 to midnight. 20 minutes to midnight. Hour and 40 minutes show tonight. Peaceware. When I made my video last night, 11 seconds longer, I think it was. Yeah, 11 seconds longer. How many seconds longer is this video going to be when we come back on Sunday, I wonder? Just shoot up Jesus the Model. I forgot to shout out last night. I seen. And Stephen Young. No spiders in Las Vegas. Wow. Hi, Stephen. Savannah's Fort. If you put a comment in my comment section long before the show, Google disappears it. If it's within 2 or 3 hours of the show, it might still be there when the show starts. But any comments that are sitting there before the show, tendency to disappear before the show starts. John Curtis. We're almost up through the names. Richard. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hope you have a great weekend. Philip 1. So they're just people in the comment section. And just a quick shout out. Kind of close the night down. Randy. Thank you. Good night, Randy. We're almost all the way up through the comments. Well, my inside, I don't have all the comments, but most of the comments. John Shiflett. Angel's Place. We're almost through. Another Gmail, I think I already showed it out, but why take a chance? Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Oh, crap. Yeah, looks good. Chelsea, MC. Invisible Rabbit. Just when you think you got everybody. Kevin Marble. Conrad Felix, I think I already shouted out. Port Angeles, I think I shouted out, just to double check. I know Colette S is out there somewhere. Good night, Colette. Swanee D, you haven't heard from Swanee the week. I'm just double checking before we call it a night. There we go. Looks good. Lots of good stuff tonight. That was a great show, I thought. Thanks, snakes, doggies, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday night unless there's a major event, major earthquake or something like that. There's Colette. Night, Colette. Thank you. No, that's right. I'm not supposed to eat anything. Thanks, John. I forgot that, actually. Lead vests are overrated. Darlene Perot. Sunshine Wolf was there last night. I forgot to shout out. Shout out to Kevin Blanche. She's probably out there somewhere. I'll read the comments after, rather than eating, because I'm not supposed to eat for 6 hours before. And I only ate once today. Pretty meager at that. Broccoli and cauliflower and asparagus and tomato, I think it was. Okay, well that's it. Good night, everybody. Apologize for not getting the boat fixed. I've done the best I could. I'm sore all over from trying, and I'm not going to stop trying, but I thought for sure we can resolve it. I'll keep at it. I'm not giving up yet. Actually, I don't have an option. I can't give up. We got to do the research, right? Good night, everybody. See everybody on Sunday. Take care, folks. Thank you for finding time and the energy and the fortitude to come here and hear me out.